cosplay makeup is, of course, is replicating like the non-human characters, like any sort of like fantasy makeup, sort of like that. That's always going to be like, one of the first things that comes to mind when people think about like cosplay makeup. But the second, more mundane purpose is it just makes you photograph significantly better. Because, this is cosplay, it's a visual medium, and as such, you're going to be photographed. So, like, yeah, for instance, one of my first times ever doing like Captain Jack Sparrow, I was doing my makeup for it, and I was just sort of at the convention center, and like, like, I saw some photos of me is really weird ass outfits. You might as well go the extra mile with the face, try and stand out. Because, like, you want that distance for your face. You want to be seen from, like, a stage. You want to make sure that someone all the way in the back of the audience can read your facial expression. And a great example for, like, the uses of cosplay is for, like, just storytelling through fine details. Because, it sort of goes hand in hand with weathering, for example, in a costume. Because, like, think about if you're doing like a mad character, it's like, makeup definitely is not going to be necessary for that. But it's like, if you put like a few minor scars on your face, or if you just like grind your face up a bit, it like adds so much more to the character. Like, it makes you look in a specific outfit and more like you're a character from a fictional universe, has like an actual role in said universe. Now, for as far as makeup goes, there are so many different types of makeup. I'm going to be using this panel just as like, a very brief introduction, telling you like, excuse me, like, what products, a few brands to check out, and where to find this. If I had like you know one of these days, I would like to actually be able to do like a live demonstration for one of these panels, but being the basics of makeup and doing a live demonstration, it would take like significantly longer than the time we had. And we already ate up like 15 minutes of it because I couldn't figure out how to use technology. But yeah, so I feel like I think cosplay makeup can basically be broken down into maybe about four or so different areas, basically. So you have your basic makeup, your basic everyday makeup, which is just, you're enhancing your facial features, even just like, general beautification, that sort of stuff. You're just trying to look your best. And then into like the more theatrical, which, for something like this, we're all dressed as cartoon films. Like, this is a really theatrical, really elaborate way to start. Be more experimental. Just, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. Now, camouflage makeup can have multiple purposes, multiple purposes for specific applications. Makeup in general is just for like, and skin, or people with like tattoos that needed them covered for like wedding photos, people bruises that need all that sort of thing. Learning how to cover things with makeup to look your best for photography. And so yeah, there's a lot of like different cosplays out there, like painstakingly cover their tattoos. Disney princess with like sneakers tattoo on her arm. I mean, it's a look. Then back from more mundane, we go back into that bandage into special effects, which is my where I'm actually we're getting into stuff like face and body painting, prosthetics, wounds, scars, all that. So as far as like makeup products go, powder makeup, so stuff like pressed foundation, what you would see in the Halloween stores, grease paints, which is sort of like a they kind of go a little thinner, really good. All base paints, really good. Paradise paints. And there's also airbrush paints, which generally airbrush paints usually either water-based or alcohol-based, depending on what brand you buy. You can get like extremely fine detail with them, very good for like for like no makeup looks because airbrush paints are going to be like extremely light on the skin, so they won't look as cakey as like certain like. But they're also very good for like special effects and also like speed of application, which is why like most haunted houses use like exclusively airbrush just because you can get like character's full face done in minutes or so. So I'm gonna break down some of the pros and cons of each type of these makeup. So we're gonna start with the powder makeup. So excuse me. One of the one of the pros of powder makeup is that it is extremely easy to find. You can find it literally anywhere that like would sell makeup, like any kind of drugstore. Yeah, I mean any kind of drugstore. You can't really doesn't get more basic as far as finding makeup than that. Even the professional beauty stores, they're all going to sell powder-based makeup. They're really simple because they're real user friendly. Just pick up a brush and put it on, which is nice for like certain any sort of application where it's like you don't want that dewy look to it. So whether you're going to be contouring a face with your powders or just doing like eye makeup with it, all the time you're going to want that like dewy look to it. And on that note, they don't need don't need to be set, which is ideal. So like powder is very commonly used as like as a way of setting cream makeup. And if you were to use just like a powder-based foundation from the start, you don't need to like set it at all. You just like apply it on, and it's there. It's set. So the same goes for like if you're contouring with powder. If you were to like do a face with a cream base and then detail the creams over it, you would have to proceed to like powder and seal the whole thing. But if you've already powdered your face and you go over and like powder bronzer on, it's already there. It's set. Also really nice for creating gradients. So if you have any sort of chromatic looks, stuff like that, you want to transition from one color to the other, you can get a very nice blend with the powder, depending on how heavily you layer it on and just the motion of the brush strokes. Now the cons of the powder-based makeups is, of course, not every makeup is made the same. So a lot of the time, powder makeup can vary in the pigmentation of it. So obviously, a $5 eyeshadow palette from Walgreens is not going to be anywhere near as pigmented as a $50 palette from Sephora. So that's something to consider definitely. For large areas, also not ideal because something like a cream you can easily just put onto the skin and blend it out and smooth it all over this area. Whereas a powder, you're just gonna have to constantly keep reapplying back and forth from palette to your brush if you're trying to cover a large area. I remember in my days at the haunted house, there was this one girl that just did a whole face of creature makeup with eyeshadow. I'm like, I don't know how long that took for you to do, but was it really worth the effort? They're not ideal for fine detail either. So if you were to do say an old age makeup and you wanted to paint some wrinkles on, you could get some extremely subtle effects if you were to paint the wrinkles on with an eyeshadow, but you'd really only be able to see it from up close, so not very good for fine details. And the lastly, they're also kind of messy at times. So depending on the quality of the product, it may or may not have a lot of fallout to it. Generally, I something that a lot of people are doing is they will actually do their eye makeup before they apply their foundation, just because of all the fallout coming after their eyes. They don't have to worry about them ruining the foundation that they just put on, trying to fix that. So they do their eyes, clean up the fallout, then do foundation. So moving on to cream makeup, it's generally one of my preferred ones to work with, just because I feel like it's real easy to use, and like the eyeshadows, it's very easy to find because most Halloween store makeup kits are going to be some kind of cream makeup. Now again, it's going to vary in quality. If you're buying a $5 cream makeup kit from Spirit Halloween, it's going to be vastly different from a professional cream makeup set by Ben Nye, for instance. But what's nice about them is they're usually very highly pigmented, so especially good for doing full faces of characters that are an odd color or something. You know, certain gray skin tones with orange horns. Not going to name names. So very excellent for detail work too, because you can get extremely fine lines with creams. Like I said, great for full faces. And most foundations in general. Most foundations are going to be some sort of cream base, usually anyway, unless they're a liquid. Liquid foundations generally going to be water based. But if you have a cream or just any sort of foundation in a cake, for instance, it's usually going to be a cream base that you can apply with a sponge or brush and just shear out and spread all over the face evenly. One of the other biggest advantages, because of how easily it is spread these colors out, is you can mix colors. You can't really mix with eyeshadow. Well, you can, but it's extremely messy, and you have to do a lot of scraping and mashing together. Whereas cream is just you have a little bit on palette, like a little stainless steel palette that we would often use in whenever for Chiron. We would just scrape out a color, put it onto the metal palette, scrape out another color, and just mix them together on the palette so we got a perfect foundation match for someone, that sort of thing. Now, moving on to the cons of powder-based makeup is you're always going to have to set your cream makeup. Again, looking at a certain orange horned cosplayer set. They were notoriously bad about setting their makeup. So if anyone is still paying attention right now, the most important bit of advice is set your makeup. Always set your makeup, especially if it's cream makeup. For the love of God, set your makeup. stain your skin temporarily. Like, it's not harmful at all. It's just something to consider. So certain colors like blues and greens and reds are notorious for this. Depending on the quality of the product and how much of it you're wearing, how much of an area of the skin you have it on, it can stain the skin temporarily. You're not going to be like the same color you were when you had it on, but it's like, it's going to be like a slight noticeable tinge sometimes anyway. Um, yeah, they're not quite as, you know, intuitive for like, beginners because, like I said, a lot of times people who are just doing, cream makeup for like Halloween or something, they don't really know how to apply it like properly or how to set it properly. So, most people's Halloween makeup is generally not going to be like, on the same caliber as like someone's cosplay makeup, for instance. And another downside of the cream makeup is it's usually going to run a higher price than your powder makeups. So, like, Krylon, we would have like very small, like cream wheels of colors like this that would be about like $20, and that's just like starting price for stuff like that. We had $100 palettes and upwards of like creams that were the palettes were no bigger than like a foot long, and they could cost like up to $150. So a note on grease makeup, which I brought up before, is that grease makeup and cream makeup, you'll often actually see these terms used interchangeably, but there are a few differences to keep in mind. So cream makeup is usually going to be water-based, and you can thin it down for a finer application, really good for base coats. And grease makeup is oil-based. So, that's something to really consider if you have like oily skin, is to try and avoid grease paints because I've heard a lot of horror stories about people whose skin has reacted negatively to wearing the grease paints on it because they're already oily. The pores are like taking in all the oil from the paint, and it just becomes a mess. But grease paints are usually going to have a bit more of a vibrant color to them than the cream makeup, and you can get a really sheer finish on them. So you can just like really thin it out, get like some subtle layering effects, that sort of thing. Very good for fine detailing. Now, alcohol-based and airbrush makeup, I generally kind of lump these together because a lot of airbrush makeups are alcohol-based, and a lot of alcohol-based makeup can be thinned down for use in an airbrush. So they are like the best products for like extremely fine detail. Now, as a cosplayer, you probably won't find yourself in a situation where it's like you need an alcohol-based paint. You know, first thing that comes to mind is Jack Sparrow cosplayers will very commonly buy the specific alcohol paint palette that was used in the production of Pirates of the Caribbean, just to get the extra level of accuracy and putting on like all the dirt and the grime in exactly the right places to emulate Captain Jack. But it's like a lot of that you can just simulate with whatever products you already have on hand. Unless you're doing something that's like you're going to be filming a close up of a character that like some sort of weird fantasy character, and you have like a prosthetic on that you need to be colored from scratch, you're probably not going to need alcohol paints. But airbrush paints, however, you know, I can understand that there's definitely a use for those in cosplay. Like I've said before, one of the big advantages of using airbrush paints is just the sheer speed of application. So, like I had said, haunted houses, we usually have like a 10-minute turnaround for a creature makeup. And so, yeah, it's like a full face, 10 minutes. Even we'll do some of the arms as well. It's just that fast, especially the more you practice with the airbrush. And because of the alcohol base in it, they're often very long lasting, very durable. So, for behind the house, we will always paint the hands of the creatures, and we know that since it's an alcohol-based paint, it's not going to like just come off as soon as the actors like take a bathroom break and wash off their hands. You know that's a double-edged sword, of course, because while it is good to not have your products coming right off your hands, it's also going to be very difficult to remove. Like a good example is Mystique from the X-Men films. Like I can't remember who played her in like the first two movies. That's probably that. I don't know enough about X-Men to confirm or deny that, so I'm just gonna take your word for that. But yeah, since she had to have like the whole body painted blue for some of the scenes, that was all like alcohol-based makeup and certain types of like a prosthetic base makeup called Pax paint. I'll get into that a bit later. But in order to remove that, she would literally have to just take a bath in shaving cream, just like thick shaving cream rubbed all over her arms and her body. And from what I heard, apparently her like then boyfriend left her because she quote smelled like a man. So yeah, the alcohol-based paints definitely double-edged sword. Another thing too is that they can be quite prohibitively expensive. So one thing is they're just hard to find in general outside of like dedicated makeup stores. But you're gonna get like a very small amount of product for a very high price. Now you're paying for quality there, so it's like it's not a scam or anything like that, but it's something to be mindful of. But a little goes a long way. You're not going to be using this for like doing a whole face character. You're really going to be doing this for like extremely subtle detailing. Same goes for like airbrush paints. You can get like larger quantities of the airbrush paints. They're just going to set you back a bit more. But airbrush again, really good for like full faces, especially if you need speed. Now, the other thing too is that these two, there's a significant learning curve to it. Airbrush is very, very difficult at first. It took me like quite a few years of just like understanding how my own machine worked before I was like confident enough to like actually paint another person's face with the airbrush. But there are plenty of tutorials online out there, and maybe even if you're like some classes in your area as to like how to learn to use the airbrush. I would say most important thing about airbrushing though is learn how to clean the gun, because if you don't take care of that thing, it is going to like practically punch you in the face. I have no idea what I meant with that metaphor. You kind of know what I meant. You understand me better than I do. But anyway, take care of your air guns, because you're going to be running paint through those things. You have to make sure that those things are like cleaned and dry when you put them away every time. Otherwise, you're going to clog the thing with like little specks of week old paint, stuff like that, and it's just a mess sometimes. So 100%, you need to learn how to like properly maintain those things. Now, stepping down in terms of difficulty, we're going back to watercolor paints, and watercolor is probably my favorite overall for like characters, because like airbrush, it's really good for large areas. Because if you have like a really large watercolor cake and a large brush or a large sponge, you can easily just knock out someone's full arms. Um, water activated, of course, so you just use it like any kind of watercolor paint you've ever used in an art class. Exact same principle. Uh, they're very durable in my experience. For when I do like when I do characters that require like an inhuman color to them for conventions, I will almost always use like a water-based paint, because I know it's just going to have the most setting powder, setting power, in that once that water dries, it's going to be staying on your face as long as you don't like reactivate it, and it's also very durable. I can like easily just sort of like touch my face and whatnot and not have to worry about it transferring, unlike a cream, because even if you powder your creams, you're still gonna get that little bit of transfer when you touch your face with them. The water activated paint, generally that's not as much of a problem unless you have a very oily skin. Then you could reactivate it like a tiny bit, but it's not as much of a hazard as it is with like a cream or a grease paint. So yeah, very easy to use. I feel like it's one of the more beginner friendly ones because if you have literally any experience using watercolor paint, you can use a watercolor medium. Now, some of the cons of this are layering the colors can be kind of tricky because think about it like this: if you layer a cream on top of cream, you're gonna have a color on top of a color. But if you try and layer a water-based paint that is activated by water on top of another water-activated paint, you see where this is going. So trying to like layer watercolors, it gets really tricky because you run the risk of reactivating the layer of paint you already put down. So there are some workarounds for this. Krylon used to make a line of watercolor paints that was designed to be layered. Unfortunately, they are no longer in production, and because I worked for them when they discontinued the product, I literally got to take home their entire stock. So I think I am the only person in the world that has this miracle product that none of you can ever have access to. So I am taking offers from the highest bidder currently. All right, I'm gonna start my own Tumblr convention with that money. Now, another con of the product is that they're water soluble. So some people have had success with just like using them on their body for like pool shoots, for instance, depending on how well they seal them. But you know, if you like do a whole arm, for instance, in watercolor, and you just like submerge it into water once you've already like had it dry and pull it out, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. But if you like actually touch your arm when it is wet, you are going to run the risk of like smudging or smearing the paint. Now, an interesting note about watercolors is that you can actually control the thickness of them. So if I'm doing like an extremely fine detail, like if I'm painting veins onto something, I generally like to have like an extremely diluted paint. So you can control the opacity of the paint depending on how much water you use. So if I wanted to do like a really fine vein, I'd use like quite a bit of water just so the pigment is really, really diluted. And if I was doing like a full face character, I would want like a pretty opaque base. So I would use a minimal amount of water, like just enough water so the paint is activated, but not enough that it changes the consistency. You basically get what I mean? And you can, depending on what brand you're using, you can actually sort of like work the water into the cake itself, just like with a brush, you do swirling motion and you can get it to like kind of a thicker cream consistency. It takes a bit of practice to figure out how to do it and figure out how to get the ratios just right, but you can get some very nice detail. Unfortunately, you also run the risk of like oversaturating your product, which is something I have done in the past before. So like I have a certain black that I use that I've just used it with so much water over the years that it has gone from like the regular solid cake consistency, even when dry, to now it's just like a mushy cream consistency. It is gross, and I don't know why I still have that one. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And certain colors as well are also going to be less pigmented. So, this goes kind of hand in hand with what I said about like certain colors staining. Like lighter colors like yellows and greens, they're usually going to be far less opaque than colors like whites and blacks and reds, that sort of thing. So, depending on what you're doing, it could be ideal, but it's just something to look out for. It can be either a pro or a con depending on what you're looking for. Now, there are quite a few different places to like get these products. Of course, you know, since I had worked for the company, even though they fired me, my allegiances still lie with Krylon just because because I think the products are just the best all around. The downside is Krylon is very hard to obtain, especially here in the United States, because unless you have a store near you that sells Krylon, like some makeup stores, you can order it from the company website, but as she pointed out, shipping is very expensive. Like I think it's still like $17 shipping. Yeah, it was heinous. It was insulting. But you know, there are certain certain makeup companies online that will sell try-on products. So like Namies is one. Yes, Camera Ready Cosmetics. That's what I was trying to think of. Friends Beauty, all those will sell try-on products, as well as like Ben Nye and Mayron. Ben Nye, I feel like, is a step down from Kryon in terms of quality, but they're also, you know, one of the leading theatrical makeup brands in the country. Mayron is, I personally feel like Mayron is like right on the line between theatrical makeup and Halloween makeup. Because Mayron products aren't the best, because what they actually do is there's no specific Mayron formula. What they will actually do is they will buy out smaller brands and then continue to use those brands as like a private label. So there's very little consistency between products. So that's something to consider. But you know, Mayron is nice because it's usually generally very affordable, and like I said, you can find it at like most costume stores, even Amazon sells like Mayron and Ben Nye. They don't sell Krylon for some reason, which has always annoyed me. But I would be weary about buying makeup on Amazon in general. You know, buying makeup through a third-party seller is a little dicey, so I always generally recommend buying through reputable sellers of makeup. So yeah, it's also usually better to like just buy in person whenever you can. That way you can get like a feel for the product and see if you like it or not. You don't want to spend $17 on shipping from Cryon only to realize you didn't like the consistency of this product and ship it all the way back to them. So, unfortunately, you know, this isn't always going to be a possibility because, my try-on store, it closed down because of the pandemic. So it's like, I don't have a place where I can like physically go to get try-on products anymore. But, it's worth looking around and seeing what makeup and beauty stores are near you. If there's like one that's like specializes in theatrical or professional, there's a good chance they may carry brands like Ben Nye or Krylon. Um, Especially if you were in Los Angeles. This is Los Angeles, right? But yeah, places like Los Angeles, New York, where there's a lot of like film or stage productions going on, you're generally going to have a bit of an easier time finding like a store that sells theatrical and professional makeup. So, and yeah, drugstore makeup also usually work in a bit of a pinch. Um, and yeah, websites like Alcone, Cinema Secrets, Namies, Friends Beauty, Camera Ready Cosmetics, those are generally reputable sellers. So, as far as like learning these techniques go, easiest place to start is without a doubt YouTube. There's like literally thousands of tutorials out there at your disposal. There are so many books about it as well. I have amassed a bit of a collection of like different makeup manual books from over the years, ranging from like I have books that were written like in the past decade and books that were written in like the 1940s. Um, the 1940s books have not aged well. I will I will not specify why. I will leave it up to your imagination. But yeah, and there are also professional courses out there. One of the ones I was actually trained by is there's a Chicago-based artist called J. Anthony Kosar, and he was actually recently nominated for an Emmy for his work on Lovecraft Country. He was also overseeing the makeup for the new Candyman film. So I've been lucky enough to take a few of his classes in the past. Extremely informative it's worth seeing if any like local schools or anything have something that could be of use as well. Now, it's one thing to be like watching a tutorial and trying to follow along on YouTube, but it is a much better, more comprehensive experience. Like actually have like a professional right there guiding you. You really cannot beat a hands-on experience. We only have about like 10 minutes left, 9 minutes technically. So I'll be taking any questions if you guys have any. Again, I am so sorry that I could not get the visuals working. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That is a really great question. Um, yeah, most makeup generally is going to play relatively well with each other. So I'm trying to think of like, is there any specifics that I would avoid? Oil based over water based, or vice versa. That's going to run into some issues there because, like as you know, oil and water don't want to mix. Um, Another thing too is like this very seldom applies to like your everyday costume makeup, but like certain types of special effects products aren't going to play nice with each other. So like latex and silicone notoriously hate each other. So if you're using like there's this stuff called third degree, which is like a two-part silicone mixture that you can use to like make burns on the skin. And if you use latex on top of that, the latex is not going to cure. It is just going to become a mess. And trying to think of what else. Oh yeah, something to also consider is if you're doing like latex prosthetics on a face, if you try and use cream or grease, latex is porous, so it's going to absorb that color. So it's not going to like come off or anything, but there's going to be a noticeable difference in color where the latex ends and your skin begins, because your skin is going to retain that color differently than how the latex is. Now, certain types of like special effects products can actually help to prevent this. So like the Cryon watercolor is specifically formulated so that you can use it over latex. And to also prevent this as well, you can seal your latex pieces with like castor oil before you go over with like steroid creams. You can seal them with Pax paint, which is a 50-50 mixture of prosthetic adhesive and acrylic paint. You just have to make sure that the acrylic paint doesn't have any sort of like skin irritants in it. You can also buy Pax paint pre-mix. Pax paint, it is extremely strong, like literally the strongest body paint, and that is, I think, more effort than it's worth for just like a cosplay character, because you are going to be scrubbing your arms off for hours trying to get it off, rubbing it off with alcohol, because that thing is like a well, it's a surgical adhesive. Prozade is like a surgical adhesive, so you're going to be scrubbing at it for hours with a remover trying to get that paint off. So definitely be wary of that. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you have specific examples of cosplays you've done with the different types. So I don't know if you work with all of them as far as like cream, the water, all those different kind of categories.
Yes, I can show you once I get down there. If the visuals were working with this, I would have been able to show you a corresponding example for each of them. So as soon as I step down here, I can help you out and show you. Any other questions? Yes. You can. Something I was like sort of playing around with last year was a lot of my makeup. I generally wouldn't really put a foundation on. I just put like a primer on and then just put like some powder makeup on top of that. I mainly use that for like more subtle character makeup. I was sort of experimenting with like likeness makeup last year, trying to make myself look more like a specific actor. So yeah, I feel like that generally helps because like if you have too stark of a foundation and you're painting someone else's face over that, you can quickly get into the uncanny valley. So retaining my regular human skin tone definitely helped a bit. I saw you had a question, okay?
Yeah. Do you have any tips for actually getting face painted on evenly?
Uh, yes.
Because a lot
So
of people don't
things we would always tell people at Krylon was if you're using like a water-based paint, use your brush strokes in one direction only. So, if you're going like downward and diagonally on the face, only do that motion. Do not go back. Otherwise, you're just going to wipe up what you already put down. So, you just want that consistent motion instead of like, going back and forth, basically. Yes.
Use a yeah, pretty much just powder right now. Like how do I like wash the brushes?
Um, So there are a few different ways. One of the easiest ways is to just fill a spray bottle with alcohol and spray a paper towel and spray the brush itself and just, rub the brush on the paper towel and like the texture, if it's a textured paper towel, even more perfect. So it's gonna get right up all into the bristles. It's gonna get that pigment right up to there. And we have like I guess 3 more minutes, so I could probably do one more question. Um, That is actually a very good question. I spray the crap out of my face with Krylon setting spray. There was a TikTok going around talking about how great the Krylon setting spray was, and I can tell you, without a doubt, it is true. It is the greatest setting spray ever made. I made sure to steal a bunch of cans of it. You didn't hear me say that when the store closed. I totally didn't steal any products whatsoever when the store closed. Plead the fifth.
I will say a second in Pylon. I've had really good experience with One Piece setting spray. And it is okay, but like not great One Piece. It still makes me
So, yeah, on the note,
Was that setting spray a pump or an aerosol?
aerosol. They did sell it in a pump, so you could buy like a whole refill just to like refill your spray bottle, but it always works significantly better when it's in the aerosol cans. We had like spray paint size cans of it, and it looked scary as hell and industrial, so people were often kind of intimidated when we brought it out. But man, did it hold! I'm wearing it right now. I made sure that I have like enough to last me for quite a while.
Yeah, I recently bought a pump setting spray. It does not work as well as I hairspray. Yeah, I use hairspray right now because I don't have it anymore.
Also, Pylon shipping's actually like low, like full volume with us right now. Yeah, it's 11 right now.
Oh, thank God! That is significantly better than when I used to
One
work
little
there.
makeup kit for like the coloring body paint or whatever, just like $11.
So yeah, I want to thank you all for coming to this panel. I'm so sorry that like the audio wasn't working, so I couldn't really show you any examples. But yeah, I hope you found this informative.
That's my friend. That's my friend. I would have said to my dad. Hi, Brad.
Incognito over here.
Yeah, and then we were like not ready to go out, and then she's like, "Oh, there's a panel," and then we got here and she left. Oh, here, this is for what is it for? Just for panelists maybe, or for community guests? It's community guests. Community guest bed. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. I have you on Instagram, so I've seen some of them, but I was curious. Yeah, like which ones you've used for what character, you know?
So yeah, this is like most of the games are done with like all the same products.